In a previous video, I mentioned that I would be going through my personal IDU prep that I did when I did my IDU examination based off of the IDU prep method that I described. And from that preparation, this is a sort of document that I created at that time. So I'll just be going through it. So maybe you'll have an idea of how to organize your preparation so it'll be easier for your actual examination. So there are probably some grammatical spelling errors here and there because that wasn't really my priority at the time. So please don't mind that. And yeah, I'll be going through this document. So of course, the first thing are the subjects. I wrote the IDU examination that synthesized mathematics and individuals and societies, and the global context that was the focus of the examination at that time was personal and cultural expression. So the first thing I did was sort of just break down what this global context meant to me without any further research so that I would form a better understanding of it. I also made sure to include possible explorations that relate to the global context. And then, of course, there's the breakdown of the elements of the global context, which are these three that I mentioned previously. I just broke down what they meant and just how they differentiate from each other because a lot of questions focus on each element specifically. So it's not good to talk generally about the global context, but to be able to talk specifically about each element. And moving on to the key concepts, specifically the individuals and societies key concepts, as well as the mathematical key concepts, and their meanings in relation to each specific subject. So I just wrote some bullet points on the definitions, just generally the features, what the key concept is about, and just some examples of how it relates to each specific on the subject that I'm talking about. Here, I mainly just talked about the key concepts, but as mentioned before, it's good to have an idea of how the related concepts work in relation to the subject as well. But the main focus would be the key concepts. So for individuals and societies, there was change. There was time, place, and space. There was systems, as well as global interaction. So although it may seem like I wrote a lot, it's not that you have to write this much. It's just that you have to get a basic idea of you have to be able to explain the key concept in relation to the subject. That's really all you need to know. You should also know how your key concept could apply to the specific subject. And these are the mathematical key concepts, which are logic, form, and relationships. So as I mentioned, you should be able to define your concepts in relation to the subject. A good example would be relationships. Of course, we don't mean the relationships between family members, lovers, and stuff like that. We mean the connections between quantities, properties, concepts, and all the mathematical stuff. So that's why a definition, being able to define the key concepts in terms of the subject, is very important. Moving on to the statement of inquiry, the statement of inquiry that I had at the time was cultural perspectives should be sought when making decisions regarding decisions between built and natural environments. So if we just were to take a look at it, we can just see some keywords: cultural perspectives. This obviously relates to personal and cultural expression because this SOI had to be derived from the global context. So, okay, the new things I see from here: cultural perspectives and built and natural environments. So it's not as if I don't know the definitions of the words, but it's good to know what collectively it means as a phrase and what does it mean in this context. So I define cultural perspectives as well as built and natural environments in this method. And I also explored the key concept from INS that I could connect with the statement of inquiry. How do I connect change to this specific SOI, time, place, and space systems, as well as global interactions? And of course, the same for mathematics, logic, form, and relationships. And just a reminder, everything you write here is up to you, your opinion. As long as it makes sense, you will be getting marks for whatever you write. It's all about justification in this type of examination. And there will be a few inquiry questions given to you based off of the global context and statement of inquiry. So I tried to answer the questions in as much in detail as I possibly could. And a good thing to take notice of is when you answer, try to incorporate the different elements of the global context, as well as keywords from the statement of inquiry, because that's generally the main focus. So when you know that this is what you should be talking about, most of the time you will be talking about the right thing. So no matter what you talk about, eventually you'll have to be going back to the global context, statement of inquiry, and just the main idea, or else because the question is structured in a way where you should be going there. So if you're not, you're probably doing something wrong. So the statement of inquiries, the inquiry questions that I got was, what is the nature and purpose of creative expression? So I just broke it down to many questions. What are the different types of creative expressions? How does creativity impact people? What is your perspective on different forms of creative expressions? And what does creativity mean to you? Is it beneficial to learn about others and their perspectives? You can always break down these inquiry questions into more specific questions to help you think more, help you think of how they could possibly expand this one inquiry question. And what do we need to consider when developing a natural area? From what I researched, I just wrote down the main points: environment, context and setting, physical requirements, user experience and upkeep. How does urbanization impact culture? So when they give this type of question, normally you should always consider negative and positives. A lot of IDU questions involve evaluation, meaning they want you to consider positives and negatives and then give a final evaluative conclusion. So you should always you should always make sure you look at the command term properly. If it says explain, describe, okay, then anything you say will go. If they say evaluate and you only talk about the positives, no matter how well you explain it, you won't be getting all the marks because you're not fulfilling the conditions of the question. And how is the natural environment impacted by the built one? You can just sort of see all these inquiry questions are related back to the statement of inquiry, because these questions are just breakdowns of the statement of inquiry. And then to the pre-reading materials. So I'll probably just show you what my pre-release materials are first, so you can get an idea of how my examination was like. So this is what you'll probably get from your teacher, the interdisciplinary pre-release materials. So this is November 2022. What I did was May 2022. So generally, my pre-release materials: reference 1, a video about the distribution of world population now and in the future. It's video transcript. Video about the Ethiopia urban expansion program. An urbanization development plan. A selection of Ethiopian cultural artifacts. You can click these and I'll show you. An infographic of the baobab tree. Examples of artifacts, architecture that are culturally sympathetic to their natural surroundings. And how culture shapes our cities. Just from going through all this, you can really see there's a very obvious connection between this, global context, statement of inquiry. Everything is just sort of connected like that in the IDU examination. So the first thing I did was try to explore the context of all the sources. One way you can do this is by looking at the origin of the source. We know that the origin of the source is Gapminder. You could try to explore who they are, what they do, what's their purpose. It'll help you understand the source a bit better. Maybe they even have videos that help you explain the concept of the video even to a clearer extent. And you could also look at the Ethiopia Urban Expansion Plan, a more detailed version of it. You could explore the Ethiopian cultural artifacts, find out their history, origin, stuff like that. You could look at the baobab tree, what it was used for, how did it come to be, how is it now. Same for architecture and all that. This context will just help you with your explanation. And moving on to the sources. So what words and ideas in the sources are new, challenging to understand? There's really nothing. So what I did was I just sort of put here the context, the extra information from the context that I found. So I found out who Gapminder is. I found out about the organization. I found out extra information about the video that wasn't necessarily in the video from this research. And yeah, origin of the source, purpose of the source. You should be able to just generally identify the purpose of the source so you can answer the following question. The following questions would be on the benefits of the two subjects, mathematics and INS, in effectively communicating the purpose. So mathematical proportions and numbers, how are they utilized? And just generally, any concept in mathematics doesn't necessarily have to be numbers, but it could just be anything about mathematics. I don't really know how to explain it. There's not much in me explaining this because it's specific to me, but the general idea is how this subject helped to communicate the purpose that you decide. As long as it's not too far off, it's not too general, it's a good purpose already. And the same for individuals and societies, the benefits in using it to communicate the purpose, and the limitations of just using mathematics, and the limitations of just using individuals and societies. So after you do this, it's good to also look at the benefits of using mathematics and individuals and societies together, because a lot of questions ask you, how does the synthesis of the source help with, how does the synthesis of the two subjects help with communicating this and that? So they want you to know, how does the combination of the subjects help with this? So most of the time they'll be asking a combination, not really specifically one subject and the other. So it's good to identify how they help each other. And of course, what connection can be seen with the global context, as well as what connection can be seen with the statement of inquiry. And the same thing for source 2. I just identified words that I didn't really understand, explained them. And I also sort of just wrote down the summary and the main idea of the source. Especially for videos, this is important because you can't be spending time watching the videos and trying to wrap the concept around your head during the examination. So you could possibly just look at this before your examination and keep it fresh in your mind. So you honestly don't need to watch the video to know what it's about anymore. And yeah, origin, purpose, benefits of mathematics, benefits of individuals and societies, limitations of mathematics, limitations of individuals and societies, as well as, so okay, you even, let's say there could also be limitations in using both mathematics and individuals and societies together. In the previous video, I mentioned that there could always be another subject that you could incorporate into effectively communicating the purpose. For example, I mentioned here scientific principles could also be used. So science would be a very helpful subject in understanding. So that's the limitations, even with the synthesis of these two subjects. So it's also good to look at limitations rather than just focusing on the benefits of putting them together. And the connection with the global context and statement of inquiry. Same with source 3. Source 4, of course, source focuses on the artifacts, the cultural artifacts in Ethiopia. So it's good to break down on what each source is about. So just for my IDU examination, one of the questions focused on you choosing one of the cultural artifacts in from the source and explaining how that source helped with um, helped to sort of show the cultural aspects of Ethiopia. So although the source does give you a basic idea, the information is quite limited. You don't really know the history, you don't know the cultural significance to a great extent to get on emotional level to show to have that deep of an explanation. So this context was very helpful for me because I could expand based from that and still have correct information because you can't be making assumptions either. When it comes to facts, you can't be assuming. So it's good to have sort of information on these types of things. Like, for example, a good example is this running shoe. There's this running shoe that's seen as a cultural artifact, and they do mention some basic information, but they don't really mention why it was so significant. Like, what's such a big deal about a running shoe? The fact is that this Ethiopian athlete ran the race barefoot and actually won the race using that, which made it such a big deal. This is why it's known as a cultural artifact. The source doesn't tell you that, but it's such an important piece of information that you could use to support your point. So you never know what could come in handy, so it's always good to have everything. And yeah, everything this again. And it's just the same thing repeating for all sources. It may be tedious, but it really will be helpful when you actually do your examination. It makes you feel like you just understand everything inside out, and all you just have to do is write your thoughts out. Because the questions will just keep on repeating in a way where you'll just keep on writing the same thing over and over because they have to center around that same concept. They don't really have a choice because that's what the IDU examination is about. And I just broke down the IDU examination structure to remind myself. And these are some sample questions that I thought could perhaps appear based off of the idea that mathematics and INS could appear. Task 1, you can't really predict it, but task 2 and task 3, you get a basic idea of what type of question may come out. Although you don't know the specific question, you know the general idea of the type of questions that could come out. The same for task 3. And then here are some critical topics that I thought would possibly come out based off of the idea of the pre-reading materials and all that, as well as the type of questions that could come out. INS commonly asks these types of questions, and mathematics as well. Although I can't say that these are the questions that came out, they really are not. But it's always good to have an idea because they may be, they may not be. You never know. And yeah, that would be it of my IDU prep. Thank you for watching.